In the heart of a small, fog-shrouded village, a single house stood at the edge of the forest, abandoned and rotting. For 20 long years, no one had dared to even approach it. The stories were whispered in hushed tones of those who tried to enter, only to vanish, never to be seen again. They said a single light in an upper window never went out, a ghostly beacon in a house that hadn't seen electricity in decades. They spoke of a woman, a silent specter, who would sometimes appear at that very window, her gaze fixed on the village below. One night, a young man named Samer, full of bravado and skepticism, decided to put the legends to rest. He declared it all superstition, a tale to scare children. Grabbing a flashlight, he set off into the woods, his laughter a thin disguise for the fear creeping into his heart. But the deeper he went, the more the world seemed to hold its breath. The closer he got to the house, the quieter everything became. The chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, the hum of the wind all gone. All that remained was an unnerving, absolute silence, broken only by the wet crunch of his own footsteps on the damp earth. He finally reached the front door. It hung slightly ajar, a dark, gaping mouth that seemed to be waiting just for him. He gave it a gentle push. The sound that followed was a long, agonizing creak that echoed through the night like a dying breath. As he stepped inside, the air turned instantly frigid, so cold it bit at his skin. The shadows in the corners of the room weren't still, they seemed to writhe and twist, breathing in the darkness. To his left, a large, ornate mirror hung on the wall, its surface clouded with a thick layer of dust. Driven by a strange impulse, he wiped the section clean with the sleeve of his jacket. And his blood ran cold. His reflection was smiling back at him a wide and natural grin, even though his own face was a mask of tense stillness. As he stared, horrified, the reflection slowly, deliberately, raised its hand, beckoning him closer, inviting him into the glass. And then, a whisper slithered out from the depths of the mirror, a chilling, sibilant voice that felt like it was right beside his ear. "You were the last to enter, and now you'll never leave." Samer stumbled backward, his hand fumbling, and dropped his flashlight. It clattered to the floor, its beam cutting a frantic arc across the room before landing on the wall opposite the mirror. The light revealed something that made his heart stop. Carved into the plaster were words, written in what looked like dried, dark blood. Dozens of names, etched over one another, and one that was still being written, Hessa. He heard it then. A slow, heavy footstep dragging across the floorboards behind him. He spun around, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but there was nothing. No one. Just a long, impossibly tall shadow stretching from the doorway, its form distorted and wrong, reaching all the way to his feet. A cold hand, colder than ice, touched his shoulder. He whipped around again, and for a single, heart-stopping second, he saw her, a woman. Half of her face was a scarred, melted ruin. Her eyes were just empty, black sockets. And she was smiling, her teeth blackened and broken. Her whisper was the rustle of dead leaves. Finally, "I won't be alone." His scream was swallowed by the house, a sound that would never reach the outside world. The next morning, the villagers saw the front door of the abandoned house hanging wide open. Cautiously, a few of them approached. Inside, the dropped flashlight was still on, its weak beam painting a circle of light on the dusty floor. And on the wall, the name was now complete, Samer. From that night on, the villagers noticed a change. It was no longer one figure that stood in the upper window. Now, there were two, standing side by side in the darkness, their silent silhouettes staring out towards the village. When Samer disappeared, the village mourned, but no one truly knew what had become of him. Inside the house, however, his story had only just begun. He awoke to a sensation of crushing cold, lying on a floor that wasn't wood or stone, but something else entirely. He was adrift in an endless, suffocating darkness. He tried to move, to sit up, but the air itself was heavy, thick and viscous like water, resisting his every motion. Far in the distance, a faint light shimmered, a single point of luminescence in the void. It was coming from a mirror, hanging impossibly in the middle of nowhere. Drawn by an unseen force, he drifted towards it. As he got closer, he saw his own reflection staring back. But he wasn't alone. Behind his image in the glass stood dozens of other faces, pale, gaunt, their eyes hollow pits of despair, their mouths open and silent, and ending screams. A whisper, like a cold breeze on a grave, brushed against his ear. "You're one of us now." He reached out, his fingers trembling, to touch the surface of the mirror. The moment his skin made contact, the glass rippled like water, and the mirror swallowed him whole. He fell into another world, a maddening labyrinth of endless, twisting corridors. Shadows danced on the walls, moving with a life of their own. The air was filled with a cacophony of disembodied voices, crying and laughing all at once, the sound echoing from inside his own skull. And there, in the center of it all, the burned woman was waiting. Her voice, when she spoke, was cracked and ancient, a sound of dust and decay. "I was the first," she rasped. "I lived here, and the house never sleeps, because we can never die." Then she opened her mouth, but it wasn't her voice that came out. It was a scream. A terrible, collective human scream, woven from the final, terrified cries of every soul that had ever been trapped within those walls. Seymour clamped his hands over his ears, but it was useless. The voices were already inside his head. He was flooded with visions, the final moments of every person before him. He saw their deaths, felt their terror, their agony, all trapped in a perpetual loop between the mirrors of the house. It was then that he finally understood. The house wasn't a building. It was a living entity, a predator that fed on fear and despair. Every new soul it consumed was just another breath in its lungs, another beat of its black heart, keeping it alive. The woman placed her icy hand on his chest, right over his heart. Her final whisper was a promise of eternal damnation. "Your heart still beats. Now the house will be complete." A searing pain tore through him, as if his very soul was being ripped apart. Cracks, like shattered glass, spiderwebbed across his chest. A dim, faint light escaped from within him, pulsed once, and then faded into nothing. Far away outside in the real world, a single, final scream echoed across the forest, before being snuffed out by an absolute, profound silence. The next morning, the villagers noticed something strange. For the first time in 20 years, the window of the abandoned house was dark. The light was gone. A sense of relief, fragile and uncertain, settled over the village. But it didn't last. The following night, the light returned. And this time, when the villagers looked up, they saw the woman was no longer alone. Seymour stood beside her, his face a blank canvas, his eyes to pits of pure, empty black. Since that night, anyone who dares to walk near the edge of the forest after sundown reports hearing something on the wind. To voices, whispering together in perfect, horrifying harmony, "Come in. The house isn't complete yet." Thank you so much for joining me on this terrifying journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button. And subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there, and whatever you do, don't answer if the darkness calls your name.